Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again. Can you believe it? We are already at the last episode of our series on vehicle architecture. It's been great chatting with you, Raul, and I don't want to let you go just yet. So for this one, at least the final episode, let's see if we can dive deeper into how OEMs and tier suppliers can leverage their capabilities during this transition to new vehicle architectures. And I know we've covered a lot of ground, talked about consumer experience, how that plays a role, impact of sustainability, cost, safety, performance, what drives these changes, what sort of impacts are we looking at. But today I wanted to introduce another dimension, which is time. And at the end of the day,
Mhm.
you can have all these great ideas, technological changes, but I think everyone is curious about, hey, what's the timeline? How should you think about the short term versus the long term. So let's delve deeper into that.
Sure. Well, I mean, that is really the billion-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's something that's on everyone's mind.
Mhm.
The short answer is that there's really no definitive answer. There's no specific year where you say, okay, this is before and after, because there's really no mandate, as opposed to, for instance, emissions, etc. So,
Correct.
the best way to think about it is kind of a spectrum.
Mhm.
So, say if say 5% of your portfolio is tied to electrical vehicles, uh, this architecture conversation might be like an R&D special project.
Mhm.
On the other extreme, if you're an EV startup, you're already there. You're already hiring people with software skills. You're already designing vehicles that have this modular zonal architecture. So for the audience, you have to think of where you are in that spectrum. Now,
Right.
this is not a hard number, but I would argue if you're somewhere between 30 and 40% of your portfolio being tied to electrical vehicles, autonomous
Mhm.
vehicles, etc., you
Yeah.
really need to think about implementing that architectural concept across the portfolio because somewhere around that range, the economics really outweigh the complexity of it.
You're right, and definitely makes sense that there like you cannot pinpoint a date. There's no definitive one, right? So it depends on where that organization is in its journey and the capability you can leverage, right? The organic or inorganic sort of capabilities. So let's talk more specifically about OEMs versus tier suppliers. Maybe how should they look at this transition?
Sure. So automakers are definitely driving this change. So
Hmm.
you can think about them as being ahead chronologically. I mean, they are the ones that are setting the pace for the rest of the ecosystem. They're the ones that are already spending a lot of time integrating all these different things. They're the ones that are already developing or hiring software talent, and they're already in the process of shifting from hardware centric designs to software centric designs, right? And I'm obviously EVs are already there,
Correct. Yep.
and so there's a lot of changes there. On the supplier side, they'll be a little bit behind, and for sure they'll have to make tooling and material adjustments because the hardware itself is going to be different. Now, what's going to be interesting is that suppliers could start also developing their own software talent, so they can start adding more value, if you will, to their products.
Okay.
If they spend the time creating the software that makes it easier for their components to integrate into the system, to literally plug in,
Right.
that's a huge value to the automakers.
Right. Right. And we've talked about this in terms of software-defined vehicles, and you alluded to the fact that software talent is something that needs to be added, and we talked quite a bit about it. So when this moves towards this era,
Mhm.
do we think that someone's disadvantaged, like someone might not be able to reap the full benefits during this transition because of certain capabilities being absent, or like how should they start? What should they start developing now, and what should they be looking at?
Yeah, it's a really good question. In my opinion, the most disadvantage customers or companies will be those that are not actively transforming their portfolio into the EV space.
Mhm.
And so if you have companies that are still concentrating on, building hardware, ICE, etc., they're going to start falling behind both on talent and innovation. And the thing in the automotive industry, the further you fall behind, the longer and the more expensive it takes to get back on track. So that's on the automaker side. The tier one is, yes, you have that, but the really there the disadvantage is for people, for companies that are managing this really broad portfolio where they're satisfying customers that do ICE,
Yeah,
customers that are in transition from ICE to EV, and EV pure only players. And this is in the context of, by the way, they make most of their profit on the aftermarket. So that's a huge disadvantage.
definitely. And it's interesting how you sort of linked these companies moving towards the EV autonomous side, building capabilities there. Now I know many automakers have started this transition, but we're obviously just beginning to see how that focus is shifting. It doesn't seem it seems substantial, I would say. Yeah. So with the demand for EVs fluctuating, like we all know, right, there have been changes in forecasts. However, I'd say like in the longer term, we know that this is where everyone needs to move. Definitely, everyone's going there. So I find it fascinating how you connected the vehicle architecture impacts to this transition, and companies keep moving towards EV, software-defined vehicle side, which could, again, I'd say that's that's another great topic for discussion as well. So I'd say thank you for joining me on these episodes, Raul. It's definitely been great to delve deep into some of these aspects. I know it's not easy to talk about each of these sections. It's a lot of moving parts as well. But thank you so much for joining.
No, thank you for having me. It's so much fun to talk about the automotive industry. So thank you. Really appreciate it.
And I'd really like to thank all our viewers for tuning in. I hope you found it interesting and beneficial. Do drop your comments and feedback. That helps us know how we did. But if you have something specific that you'd want to discuss with us, definitely let's get in touch. Till next time. Thank you.